All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Daf Yomi. And this week's Daf Yomi is sponsored by Rabbi Aaron and Evelyn Kislasi, because of Refuah Shlema for Rabbi Aaron's mother-in-law, Hadra Bat Esther. And today's Daf is sponsored by Jeff and Chava Bela Wald in honor of their son Avi's 11th birthday.
Mazel tov.
Mazel tov.
You want to hear something amazing about his 11th birthday? Today is the actual date. This is his birthday. And the official Daf of the day is Samach Beis.
Yeah.
62.
Mr. Shem.
What does Avi wear on his jersey?
Wow.
This is the
62.
Is
that amazing?
You know what that means? He's going to kill it this season.
Is that something? I encourage him to come and learn Samach Beis with us. Maybe he'll join me.
we'll see. Have to get to it.
It's so funny.
It's good. We'll see what it's about. See how what states for him. It's a little dicey, but okay. Okay. Nafa lebor v'Allah. We were talking about non-Jews and touching wine, and the next circumstance is a non-Jew falls into the vat of wine, and he comes out. And we said that if he falls in and he comes out, so then the Mishnah says that it's mutter. Right, nafal abor v'Allah. Right, so then we're going to say that is it's prohibited for you to drink it, but you're allowed to sell it. So Amar Rav Papa says lo shona ella shala ala mace. That's only if he comes out dead, right? Because if he comes out dead, then you're not sure what happened there, right? The guy was a little preoccupied, so you don't know what happened to him. Aval Allah chai aser. But if he comes out alive, then the wine is no good, even for benefit. My time. What's the reason? Amar Rav Papa says, "Dedamia like yom edom," because it's like he's got a bench gomel, right? He's so happy that he's to worship his idol. So consecrating this wine as he's climbing out is like for sure what he would do. So therefore, that's why the wine becomes prohibited. That's for sure. Madadu bekana, if he is measuring it with some kind of a stick, kol elu hayam. I said there was stories that were all like all of these circumstances. Va'amru, and they said, Yimacher, that you have to sell it, and Reb Shimon said matir, that it is completely permissible. Amar of Ada bar Ava, so Rav Ada bar Ava says, Yanuchulo l'Rebbe Shimon brachos al rosho. We should get blessings on the head of Rabbi Shimon. He holds that non-Jews touching and coming in contact with a Jewish person's wine was no rabbinic decree prohibiting making the wine prohibited to drink, only if it's either going to be consecrated for Avodah Zara or it's not. And so therefore, since that is the way that he held, hey, you know what? He permitted a lot of wines. Keshu matir afilu b'shtil. When he says it's permissible, he says even drinking is permissible. Ukeshehu oser. And when he said it's prohibited, oser afilu b'hana, then it means that it's completely prohibited even for getting benefits because it's for Avodah Zara.
Rav is the negative, and then the Rabbeim are in the middle, right? So
Amar Rav Chia Brei de Abba bar Nachmeni, Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Rav. So then Rav Chia, the son of Abba bar Nachmeni, said the name of Rav Chisda in the name of Rav, Vamri Law, and some says Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Zeiri, so that Rav Chisda said the name of Zeiri, Halacha Kirbi Shimon, that the halacha is in fact like Rabbi Shimon. Ekedamri, those say Amar Rav Chisda, Amar li Abba bar Chanan, Hachi Amar Zeiri, Halacha Kirbi Shimon, that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon, but the Gemara concludes ve'ein halacha Rabbi Shimon. The halacha is not like Rabbi Shimon, unfortunately. So it's more like all of these Gemaras that we've been discussing, that it is in fact prohibited to drink. You have to sell it. Nato chavis v'zarka bechamaso lebor zehaya ma'aseh ve'echshiru. The next case was a non-Jew was so angry he picked up a barrel and he threw it into a vat of wine, and if that happens, this happened, and they said it's permissible. Says permissible.
The non-Jew not touching the wine.
Because he's not touching, he's pushing, he's forcing the wine. He's using his energy, and he's doing it with what seems to be a lack of intent. So Amar Ravashi says, Kol shebezav tameh be'ovei kochavim ose yayin nesech. This sounds like a incredible general rule, which is that whatever contact a zav would make with an item, it would create it could cause its impurity. That's the way that a non-Jew touches wine, makes it yayin nesach. Now, the rules by a Zav is not only if he touches it, but if he carries it, or if he leans on it, if he sits on top of a sofa that has 5 pillows, all of the pillows underneath are all tamei. Rashi and all the Mefarshim say that is not what Rav Ashi means at all. Has nothing to do with any of that stuff. All that he means is that the touching, just like the touching is intentional, he has to actually touch the wine in order for it to be tamei. So too, yayin nesach there has to be a contact. Kol shebezav tahor bova kochavim ino osi yayin nesach.
These came up before, these examples.
Touching with his hand or his feet.
Sorry, we're going to be talking about touching. Either it doesn't really make a difference for this. So Eisvei Rav Huna l'Rav Ashi. So Rav Huna says to Rav Ashi, "Not was a chavis v'zarka b'chamasol lebor." Right, there was a case that he took the barrel and he threw it in his anger into the cistern of wine. Zaya Maisa, this was the story. Bebeis Shan, and it happened in Beishan. Vechshiru, and they permitted it. Now, what does that mean? Bechamaso in. That was only because he was so angry. Right, so since he was so angry, then he was preoccupied. And therefore, that's why the wine didn't become prohibited. But shelo bechamasolo, but if it wasn't like that, he just picked up the barrel, even though he doesn't touch it, throws it into the vat, it would be prohibited. So how could you say that it's not if he didn't touch it? So samach aleph amad aleph, hasam dekazol minei uminei. The answer is that circumstance is where the barrel was rolling and bouncing and then wound up into the greater vat, meaning he never intended necessarily intentionally for it to get into the vat. However, if it was intentionally thrown into the vat, then it potentially, even if it was in anger, could have been prohibited.
So
yeah, hang on 1 second here. Yeah.
I find that we're getting the same cases, but we come up with different outcomes, and that's what I'm trying to understand.
You're going to love a Rashi that we're going to get at the end. So we're going to get a Rashi at the end that's going to explain everything more or less according to Rashi's opinion. It's not everybody's opinion, but it's Rashi's opinion. So he says makes a yain nesach. Then we said Eisvei Rav Huna asked Rav Ashi, if he takes and he throws it, he has to be angry, but it would the moon would be wanted. So he throws it to the wine. Then the wine would be, even though he didn't touch it, and then we say that there is because he was dragging it, is rolling to the pit. So that's what happened. The goy was, since he's rolling it over to the pit, even though we don't necessarily know if he touched it or not. So then it seems like it's something that he could be touching because he's rolling it, moving it. But if he's doing it in his anger, then he's not touching it, and that's why it's permissible. However, if it was just picking something up and throwing it over, then since he didn't touch it, even if he wasn't angry, it would not make the wine no good. Since he didn't touch it.
But remember we said before, you didn't have to be...
Correct. We talked about cocoa and palm tree. Hang on.
And it didn't have kavana. It didn't have... So it's like...
So we're gonna do this Rashi, because we have time. Mm-hmm. We're going to do the Rashi on the bottom of Samach Aleph Amud Beis, that he summarizes the whole thing. Okay, so hang on until he summarizes. We're going to do all the cases, and then we're going to see Rashi sort of tries to answer up what is the general rule with all of the different cases. How does it all work? Okay, next Mishnah. Somebody is making a non-Jew's wine in his... he goes into a non-Jew's wine press, and he's making the wine for the non-Jew. We had this case, we brought it yesterday, and he's making kosher wine for the non-Jew, right? The non-Jew owns the factory, but he says, hey, Pesach's coming up, let's make kosher wine. So the Jew comes in and he does it. V'nosno b'rishuso, the wine is stored in the non-Jew's property. Hapasuach l'rishus harabim, and the wine, the storage facility is open to the public. Okay, everybody can see all the wine that's there. If it's a city that there are Jews and there are non-Jews there, mutter, then the wine's fine. Because the non-Jew is worried that some Jews are going to catch him fiddling with the wine, and then it will become ruined. So therefore, he won't touch it. But if everybody's not Jewish, then the non-Jews will cover for each other, and it's usher. That makes the wine prohibited. Ad sheyeshev umishamer, until there's somebody sitting there, a Jew is sitting there, and he's watching the wine. Vein hashomer tzarich liyos yoshev mishamer. He doesn't actually have to be sitting there the entire time. Afal pishu yotze v'nichnas mutter. He just has to be coming in and coming out. right? He just every once in a while, ready to catch him, right? You need mashgiach.
Mashgiach. I was about to say, can the public be a mashgiach? Like it's sort of to?
Yes.
Like we don't need COR to be a mashgiach.
How dare you?
As long as the kitchen is in the front of the store.
Right.
Right? You have the kitchen in the back, right? It has to be open for everybody to see what he's doing. Rabbi Shimon Elazar says, Rishus, we have that sort of a circumstance. I remember, if you had, if you're in a Starbucks, right? And, they used to, now Starbucks is not the same, but back when they only served coffee, right? There's the coffee, and then they would say, can I put whipped cream on it, whatever? Here's the can of whipped cream. Can I see the can of whipped cream? Yes, okay, now put that whipped cream on. You're watching him, and he's using this whipped cream. He's adding the ingredients. It would be fine, right?
When I get myself an old latte sometimes from Starbucks, I ask them if I can see the carton to make sure it's
the problem with Starbucks is other issues, right? Because they have machines and they wash their materials and they make other ingredients. They make things there in Starbucks other than coffee now. It's not so simple. It's like a non-kosher restaurant that's there. So check with your local COR.
COR knows I go for an old latte. They said it's okay, no problem.
So there you go.
We've had mashgiach from COR say, come in.
There you go.
That's where the coffee is. It's an old latte. No problem.
So Shimon Elazar says, Rishus ovdei kochavim achas hi. He says that that all of the property of all the idolaters is considered to be one. So we're going to see what is exactly he's trying to say. That we will explain later on. Okay, so now Hamitayr yeno shel ovei kochavim. According to Rashi, this is an explanation of the previous section. And it goes like this: somebody who is purifying is making kosher wine for a non-Jew. V'nosno b'rishuso. Now. He keeps the wine in the non-Jews. Now, we said if it's in public, it's okay. If it's in private, it's not. If it's in private, still, the holokosef lo hiskabalti mimcha maos. If the person says, look, you've already paid for it, so therefore, it's really the Jews. There's nothing preventing the Jew from coming in and grabbing the wine and walking out the door with it. So then mutter, then it's fine. Because then he has the permission to walk in at any time, so the non-Jew's not going to do anything to it because again, it's like I'm having mashgiach who will walk in at any time. However, if it's a circumstance where the Jew would walk in, he's going to say, you're not allowed to take this wine unless you pay. You still owe some kind of usage fee. This happened in Beishan ve'asru, and they said the wine is prohibited because if the non-Jew ever got caught with his hands in the wine, he would simply say, this is my collateral, the wine is my collateral for the money you owe me, and therefore I'm just taking back what's mine, and therefore he wouldn't get into trouble for it. Okay, says the Gemara, Be'ir shekula ovdei kochavim nami. Now, we just said that if the whole city is of non-Jews, right? So then the wine is prohibited because who's going to catch him? But there are salespeople, right? Peddlers, Jewish people are going to come into the city, even if they don't live there. There are Jewish peddlers that come through. It still is being watched. It's supervised. It's in a public place. So Amar Shmuel explains, Be'ir sheyesh lo delasayim uberiach. We're talking about a city that has doors and has lock, like a bar that blocks it, right? There's a sealed city. So different interpretations of what's going on. That means to get into the city, you had to have permission. And they would announce people who are visiting the city. So therefore, if a Jew walked into the city, the guy would know. Don't touch the wine today because a Jew is in the city. But if there would be no announcement, then he would know there are no Jews in the city. He could play with the wine all that he wanted. That's one explanation. It's a little bit unusual, the idea that they would make an announcement and say, hey, there's a Jew coming to the city, and everyone would know, right? So the other Mefarshim explain that what's going on here is that it was simply very large cities that had this kind of protection and doors and locks on their city walls.
And have security.
And so therefore, those big cities would keep their doors locked. They didn't need the outside economy in order to function. Therefore, it was unusual for there to be somebody from outside being a peddler to come into the city. They just didn't need to open the doors for anybody.
It's like a gated community.
Yeah.
It says
So Amar Rav Yosef says, V'cholon k'rishus harabim dami. If there's a window, you can see inside, that's like being in a public, right? We're not talking about a Shabbos definition of public area. This is public. The ashba, a garbage heap, which is not where people generally hang out, but people could go there to drop off their garbage. That's Kirishus Harabim Dami. That's also a public place because somebody could show up there. The dikla and a palm tree, right? People climb the palm tree every now and again. Kirishus Harabim Dami. So it's not like somebody has to be there all the time, but as long as somebody from the public could be found there, that's going to be what our definition is. Psik Reisha, let's say the top of the palm tree is cut off. So there's no dates on it. There's no reason for anybody to be climbing it. So pligi ba Rav Acha veRavina. There's an argument between Rav Acha and Ravina on whether that is, if the wine is visible from the palm tree, whether that's going to be something that is going to prevent the non-Jew from touching it.
Binoculars.
Oh, so that's what it would be for. Exactly. You climb up and for a lookout, right? Chad aser v'chad shari. One said it was prohibited, one says permitted. Man da aser, one says prohibited. Lama le desalik hasam. What would be the reason why somebody would bother to climb a palm tree that has no fruit up there? Uman da shari, the one who says it's permissible. Zimna da avda le behema. Sometimes he's going to lose his animal. Vesalik liyuni basar, and he's looking for his animal. He's got to climb up to a high place to be able to see where his animal is, and he will climb the palm tree.
Each animal will have a different dog tag, so you can identify which one's yours.
I think animals in general look fairly different to their owners, right? I know that I could recognize my dog.
You have a dog?
Right?
That's fine.
I don't now, but I'm saying like when I was growing up as a kid, right? I would know which one was mine, right? People would know which is their cow by looking around and knowing, right? The reason why they have brands on it is to prove it. Yeah, you got to prove it to somebody else. Tana Rabban and Rabbis learn. Echad halokeach ve'echad hasocher bayis bechatzero shal ove kochavim. Right? If somebody is purchased or he's renting a house in the same courtyard as this idolater, umil uhu yayin, and they've got wine, and I believe it's in the idolater's area, right? V'Yisrael dar be'osa chotzer, but a Jew is living in that same little courtyard. So then mutter, then that's fine, because the Jew that's there, right, the non-Jew is worried that he's going to get caught, right? V'afal pi she'ein mafteach v'chosim biyado, even though the wine isn't sealed, doesn't have a seal on it, it doesn't have to be locked. This is the way that the Gemara talks about the double seal that we are very familiar with, right? It has to be locked and sealed, right? So we don't need that because there's a mashkiach that's around and present, so that's okay. That's going to be okay.
I work in Sobeys on Friday. I put stickers underneath the because they're open on Shabbos. It's not open.
That's correct, right?
They need double simon there.
So that's what the double simon is for. B'chatzer acheres mutter, right? Now, if the Jewish person lives in another courtyard nearby, so then it could be permissible. V'hu shemaftech v'chosim biyado. That's where, as Yehuda says, that's where you need to have the double sign on it in order to be able to prevent the non-Jew from tampering it when the Jewish person is not expected to be there. He's not always there. Therefore, you seal it up. Right?
Especially when it's owned by non-Jew, and yet they're open on Shabbos, and you have Jews who's not from buying on Shabbos.
There you go. So you have to be able to make sure that it gets locked on. Yeno shel ovdei kochavim birshuso. Let's say it's a non-Jew's wine that's in his own possession. The Yisrael darbe osachatzer. Now a Jew lives in that courtyard. Mutter. Now we've got to be a little bit stricter. Then it's permissible, but only v'hushemaftech v'chosim biyado. That's where there's a double seal on it. Now the Jew is there plus the double seal. Right. Otherwise, the non-Jew has every ability to play with the wine because nobody's going to call him on it because it's his. So this way, by having it sealed, right? If that's why you need the double seal in the liquor store, right? Because then the non-Jew, if he owns it, he won't touch it.
Why at the kosher restaurant do you need any of it? Like, why are we so machmir with like even touching the bottle? It's not even
once it's open. Once it's open, you have a problem, right? Once it's open, then it can become yain nesach.
You have servers that are not Jewish.
But we haven't said that. We haven't said this in the Gemara yet.
We did. We talked about pouring, right? Yesterday we talked about pouring.
Right? Servers in the restaurants are not Jewish, or no, they're not from. If a Jew producer is not Jewish or Shabbat Shabbos are not from,
right?
It's not kosher.
But
how if he just gives me the bottle? Then it's not as kosher. Bring it to the
and it would seem that he would have some other sort of intention. We're going to see that Rashi at the end. You'll be able to draw all the conclusions and all the summary at the end.
Because you also talk about carrying half a full tank. Like,
yes, carrying those things when it was open, when it wasn't.
Right.
So that's correct. We did discuss that.
Yesterday we did it.
Amar le Rabbi Yochanan litana. So Rabbi Yochanan said. So he said that this, right? He said he was the Tana, but he wasn't a Tana. It was an Amora who was teaching the Brisa in front of him. You have to change it to say that even without the key. Once the Jew is in the courtyard there, even if it's the non-Jew's wine, he sees what's going on, and the non-Jew's trying to keep it as kosher wine, he won't do anything as long as there's a mashgiach there, it's fine. B'chatzer acheres, aser. Now, if it's the non-Jew's wine and the Jew lives in another courtyard, then it's prohibited. Even if it's double sealed. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's what Rabbi Meir says. The Chacham says prohibited shomer yoshev u'mishamer, until you've got a mashkiach who's sitting there watching it. Memuna habal, or until somebody who's appointed comes at specific times. Now, Chachamim aheya. What are the Chachamim saying? Right? The Chachamim say you need to have an appointed mashkiach. So ile ma'aseifa. So if you're going to tell me it's about the end, so Tanakama Nami Meiser Karaser. That's exactly what Rabbi Meir said. Rabbi Meir just said that it's prohibited if the non-Jew's in another courtyard, right? So therefore, it must be that you need a mashkiach. The Chachamim are saying the same thing. Ella aresha deseifa must be on the beginning part where it was the non-Jew's wine, but the Jew lived in the same courtyard. But Rabbi Yochanan corrected the one who's teaching the Bryce and said that if a Jew is in the courtyard, you don't even need a seal on it. Why would you need let alone a mashgiach? So rather, asay for the ratio. Let's talk about the second case of the first part, where it was the Jew's wine, and the Jew was not in the same courtyard.
I think the reason why you need a seal is because without the seal, maybe the non-Jew would give it to the Jew after he tampers with it, and then if it's not sealed properly, it's not kosher.
But now we're talking about where the question we're asking is, why do we need the mashgiach? Once we've got the seal, what's the point of the mashgiach?
Why does the mashgiach turn his back and then
it doesn't matter. The point that we've been making in all of this Gemara is that since a non-Jew knows the mashgiach can show up at any time, he won't tamper because he could get caught. Right. And if he gets caught, right, then he's in trouble. So therefore, he won't tamper knowing that there's a possibility that he's going to get caught. So Ella Aseifa Dereisha, we must be talking about the second case of the first part, where it was the Jew's wine, but the Jew did not live there. De Ka'amar Tanakama, where the Tanakama said, B'chotzer acheres mutter, v'hu shemafteach v'chosim biyodo. That if the Jewish person wasn't living there, then as long as it was double sealed, right, he had the seal on it and the key, then it was still permissible. The Chachamim are stricter, and they say Li'olam Asr Ad Sheyeh Shomer Yoshev U'Mishamer, that we're saying that it's prohibited unless a guard is sitting there. Oh, Ad Sheyavo Memuna Habal Likitzin. So until somebody is coming and guarding it. So therefore, that's the argument. Whether the double seal is sufficient when the Jewish person is not there, overseeing the wine that belongs to them, or whether you need the mashgiach. So memuna ba lekitzin griyusahu. What does that mean? That the mashgiach comes at set times? That's actually bad. Mm-hmm. If the non-Jew knows that the mashgiach is coming at 10:30 every day, so then he'll fool around with the wine at 10:50, right? So what does that mean? Ella, so we're interpreting it different.
That's why COR now has cameras in certain establishments.
Ad sheyavo memuna she'eno ba lekitzin. It means that until the mashgiach comes at times that are not set, right? He's got to come at random times. Right? Mashgiach got to show up when you least expect it. Okay, so that's what we have. Next, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, Rishus Ovdei Kochavim Achasi. He makes this cryptic statement. He says that all of the properties of non-Jews are one. So what does that mean? Iboy Lahu Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Lahakil o Lahachmir. Is Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar being strict or is he being lenient? What are we trying to say? So Rabbi Yehuda Amar Ziri, Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Ziri, Lahakel, he's going leniently, and Rav Nachman Amar Ziri, Lahachmir, and Rav Nachman said in the name of Ziri that we're going stringently. Rav Yehuda Amar Ziri, Lahakel, Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Ziri that we're going leniently, V'hachi Kamar, and this is the intent of his statement. Tanakama, the first opinion holds, Kashem Shebir Shuso Aser, just like if the non-Jew, right, has wine that is in his own possession, it's prohibited. Kach b'rishus oved kochavim acher nami aser. So too, if this non-Jew has wine that is in another non-Jew's possession, it's also prohibited. Why? V'chashinan legomlin, because we're worried that the non-Jews will just do each other favors. In other words, what you're thinking, that the other non-Jew is going to catch, right? You've got John and Frederick, and John leaves his wine in Frederick's house. Frederick isn't going to report that John came in and fooled around with the wine. Therefore, all properties of non-Jews are all one. It doesn't matter whether John keeps John's wine in John's property or whether John keeps John's wine in Frederick's property. All of those are not going to be good. So, Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Reb Shimon says, Bamed Dvar Mamurim, when is that? Birshuso. That's in his possession of Birshus Ove Kochavim Acher. Mutret, Reb Shimon ben Elazar says, he comes lenient, and he says, no, that's only if it's in his possession. Only his possession. But if it's in somebody else on the other possession, then it would be permissible, because we don't think they're going to do each other favors. Comes in, somebody starts playing with the wine, Frederick's going to say, no, John can't do that. There's something fishy is going to go, and he's going to report it. Rav Nachman Amar Ziri Lahachmir. Rav Nachman says that Ziri says he was going stringently, V'hachikamer, and this is how you read it. Tanakama says, Bamedvar Mamurim Birshuso, that when is it prohibited to leave wine the opposite way? That if when it's prohibited wine in his own rishos, John can't leave his wine in John's property. But if John put it in Frederick's property, then it would be permissible, because we don't think that Fred is going to give John a favor. Reb Shimon ben Elazar, to which Reb Shimon ben Elazar disagrees, and he says, Kol rishus ovdi kochavim achasi, all of the property of the non-Jews are one, and therefore they'll just all support each other, and they won't report it to the other to say to a Jewish person that he shouldn't drink it. Tanya Kavasi de Rav Nachman, Amar Ziri Lahachmir. We have a brisa that supports where Rav Nachman says that Ziri, that like the opinion that says Rav Nachman said in Ziri, that we're going to be strict, and that goes like this. Amar Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Reb Shimon ben Elazar says, Kol rishus ovdi kochavim achasi mipnei haramoyin, that you have to worry all of the property of non-Jews, they protect each other, and therefore you see that according to this opinion, Reb Shimon ben Elazar is the one that's strict. Debe parzik rufila osivu chamra gabe arisaihu. In Bei Parzik, the governor that was there, he placed wine by his sharecropper, right? A guy who was his employee. So Sava Rabbanan Kame de Rava Lememar Ki Chashinan Legomlin. So the Rabbanan thought to say in front of Rava that, this idea that the non-Jews will cover for each other, Hani Mili Hecha de Kamosiv Hai Gabi Hai, that's when John and Frederick are equals. Right? When John and Frederick are equals, they'll do each other favors. Avahacha, but in this circumstance, Kavan Dari say, Lav Darchve, Lo Sve, Be Parzik Rofilo Legomlin Lo Chashinon. He says, there's no reason why the sharecropper is never thinking, you know what, you'll do me a favor back, right? Because he's the boss. So therefore, why wouldn't the sharecropper tell on the boss? Because he's not thinking that the boss will tell on him later, because he's never going to ask his boss for a reciprocal favor because they're not of equal levels. So therefore, in that circumstance, that would be a reason why we would permit it. So Amar says no. Adrabah, the exact opposite is true. Even in the other opinion that says that we don't presume that they'll do each other favors, that's because the one Fred and John are not scared of each other. They're equal. So Fred will tell on John, John will tell on Fred. But in this case, Kavan Demirsus Mine, the sharecropper, is the employee. He's worried about getting fired. So Mechapi Alei Zechusa, he's going to cover up for the other guy and let him get away with it. Hahu Karcha Dehava Yasiv Bechamra de Yisrael. So there was a. One second. Page. There was a village, right? That there was Jews wine that was there in the middle of the street there. They were keeping kosher wine. Ashtakach ove kochavim dahava koi beni doni. They found a non-Jew who was there wandering between the casks that were there. So Amar Rava says, Im nitfas alav keganov chamra shari. If he would get caught with his hands in the wine and they would arrest him like a thief, then the wine is permissible because he wouldn't do that, right? Ve'ilo, but if not, and he's just, he's allowed to wander around and nobody would punish him, so then usr, then the wine is prohibited. Okay, Hadranach Rabbi Shmuel, Hadranach Rabbi Shmuel, Hadranach Rabbi Shmuel. The last Rashi, that Rashi finishes off after the end. Says Rashi, Maskana de Milsa, summary of the end. Okay, the last 6 pages, we've had case after case, and Brian says, how do I find any kind of generalities to these rules? Sounds like one thing. So he says, number 1 is, Maga ove kochavim. Let's talk about first. First, you have some cases where the non-Jew actually touches the wine. If he actually physically comes in contact. Kevan dinis gavin liga. So if he has intention when he touches it, shich, then he's mushing his hand around, and then avo pishlo nisuch, it aser bana, right? Then it becomes prohibited in benefit 100%. He touched it and whatever, he moved around. Mimasisin de'ar, and he brings the cases. Mimasisin de'ar gedamim ove kochavim mishum lech omrin naziro. We had the guy who was sipping the straw, right? Sipping from the straw. In that case, we said that was prohibited. Now, shalo bekavana. Let's say he touches the wine, comes in physical contact, but he doesn't intend to. Lo hikir bo shehu yayin mutter b'hanaf. He doesn't even know that it's wine. Then, since he touched it, it's prohibited, but it's permissible in hana. Mimas nisin decherim ove kochavim. Like the case of the crazy guy who thought that it was wine, but it was really oil, right? He touched the wine. He thought it was oil, but it was really wine. He touched it. That was prohibited, but it's not usher, but it's mutter b'hana. V'chein nafal labor. Same thing as the non-Jew fell in, right? So even he comes out, right? Even though he touched the wine, right? It's mutter. Nami shelo b'kavana, who was accidental. Umutter b'hana mimasnisin. The Mishnah says is permissible for benefit. Okay.
Right.
V'chein. Similarly, niskavingly told davar acher, right? Also, a circumstance, he touches the wine, but he's thinking that he's touching it for another purpose. For example, the case Kigon Esrog, right? The case where the Esrog fell into the wine. And he grabs into the wine and he grabs that. Deravashi, which Rashi says Shalo Bekavanahu, that's unintentional. Umutter Bahana, therefore it's prohibited, since he actually touched the wine, prohibited to drink it, but permissible for benefit. Okay, now, that's number 1, touching the wine itself. Number 2, Maga ove kochav mayede dafar acher kagon bekana. The non-Jew touches the wine through a utensil, another utensil, like he's got a stick. Anu yodin sheniskavin ledavar acher. If we know that the non-Jew was touching it for a specific other reason, he wasn't going and wishing it around for the sake of Avodah Zara. We know he had another. For example, ki maddu bekana, he was measuring the wine with the stick. Oh, hitiz esatzira, or the case where he was flicking the hornet out. So then, mutter behana mimasnis, and the Mishnah says that's even permissible to get benefit out of. That's fine. Bekavana, now if he has intention, velo chazinan lemai ichavein, but we don't understand what he was getting what the intention was. So then, asr bahana, now it's asr bahana, right? He sticks the stick in and he starts flitting around. Now it's prohibited, right? Even with a dover, with touching with something else.
Kavana to make it yain nesek.
Not even if we don't know what his intention is, right? We know that it's
questionable.
Correct, right? Me'ahu uvda de biram desharya rav mishum shelo bekavana hava. Habikavana aser, right? So, for example, this is the case in Biram, I don't remember which case that was, that it was unintentional, so he permitted it. If that means that if it had been intentional, it would have been prohibited. Now, that's number 2. Number 3, kochel she'ove kochavim, if you have something that the wine moves not by direct contact, but through the force of the non-Jew. Bechiburin kagon de orik aruki, hikir bo shehu yayin aser behana. So, for example, where he pours the wine out of the container, he knows that it's wine, then it's aser behana, right? Because he's pouring, causing it to be poured. He knows it's there. So, therefore, bottom line of all the cases is, if he knows it's wine and he's pouring it and he's moving it, he's touching it, doesn't matter. It's always prohibited, but aser behana for sure. Right? Rabbi Yochanan had the case where he publicized that was the pouring. Okay, now, lo hikir bo, if he doesn't know that it's wine, mutter af b'shtia, then it's even permissible to drink, right? The non-Jew thinks he's pouring beer. We had that case. Me'uvda de Rabbi Yochanan ben Arzav, Rabbi Yossi ben Nehorai, dechad shari afilu b'shtia, where there was a non-Jew who they called over to pour the wine. They said he didn't even know that it was wine, therefore it was permissible to drink. Mishum Jove Kochavim lo havayada. He didn't know it was wine, and he didn't touch it. So therefore, without touching it, there's no reason why we need to prohibit it from drinking. And without him knowing that it's wine, there's no reason to consider it prohibited for hana. That's where that becomes permitted all the way. The shalo bechiburin could go now. If the contact is indirect contact, right? There's no my pushing of this pushes the wine. Like for example, he throws the barrel. Right? So then that's mutter af b'shtia v'afilu niskavein. Even if there's intent, and then it's 100% permissible to drink because the non-Jew is not actually touching it.
He threw the barrel out of anger.
Through the barrel. Midirav Ashi, de Amar Kol Shebezav Tohor. Right? Rav Ashi said, only prohibits it if he's touching it. If he's not actually touching the wine, then it's permissible. But that can't be yayin nesach. Kach higia harav upsak halacha l'maisa. That's how Rashi says he understands all of these cases.
Okay, well, I have one question. I want to go.
That's not universal, but that's
this was
good summary. Now I need to borrow a Gemara because my Gemara ran out of pages.
Here, so you want to use mine.
Just grab me that one. You have to use yours. There's another one that's extra.
Why isn't a share tree in a public? Why would there be a concern a public park and a share tree?
Why would there be concern of a share tree in a public?
Because it says anything like in a public, like we talked about.
If it was planted for the sake of Avodah Zara, it would still be problematic.
62A1.
62A1. Yes. Perfect.
Planted for
Avodah.
No, but if it wasn't even, but if it's a public tree, it's not owned by anybody.
If it was a public tree planted, now you're going back. If it was planted first as a public tree, then it's difficult for them to be able to worship it. That's going to be correct. But we said that we were talking via an Asherah tree in a public place could be a problem. It's if it got planted in the public area as an Asherah.
Right.
Okay. Next. If somebody hires a worker, right, and the wine that they're working with is yayin nesach, so this guy's got a job schlepping barrels of yayin nesach. So scharo aser, his wages are prohibited. He can't get any benefit from the wages that he makes. Scharo la'asos imo melacha acheres. If he hired him and he said, "You're going to be my storekeeper, right? You're going to sell. You're the LCBO." Right, you're going to sell wine and you sell liquor and whatever you sell at the LCBO. Even if the guy tells him, okay, schlep that case of non-kosher wine from here to there, schara mutter, his wages are okay, right? Because the wages of that which is prohibited, he's not getting paid to move the prohibited item. He's getting
moving the prohibited item to make room for his item.
No, he's moving. It doesn't matter as long as he's not getting paid specifically to do the prohibited action. He can still do the work for moving the yayin nesach, and the pay is for running the cash register or moving the carts. Right? It's like if you hire somebody and he's the Baal Koreh on Shabbos and he gets paid. Well, he got paid to prepare. And then he happens to read the Torah on Shabbos, but he got paid to prepare before Shabbos. Right?
So the Iker can't be moving Nesek wine.
That's correct. That's it. If he rents a donkey with the purpose of bringing yayin nesech wine, schara aser, then the rent for the donkey that he makes is prohibited. Schara le'sheva leha, right? If he rented it for the guy to sit on it, legino aleha, schara mutter. However, right? He rents it, but the non-Jew's going to put his wineskin, right, to help. He's going to carry it too. That's mutter, right? Because that's not the main same idea exactly. Says the Gemara, my taimo scharo aser. What is the reason why the wages are prohibited? It's not actually the wine itself. So why are the wages prohibited? So, if you're going to say, well, yayin nesech is prohibited to get benefit, scharo nami aser. So then the wages are a derivative of the yayin nesech. So that should be prohibited also. So that's going to be problematic because hare orla ukilaya kerem. We have other items that are prohibited in hana. And that's, for example, orla, the first 3 years of the fruit. Kilaya kerem, we have produce that grows for grains that grow in a vineyard, right? So, de'asur and behana, you can't get any benefit from them. Utnan, and the Mishnah says, Machron v'kidish b'demehen mikudeshes. If he sells this property, even though that's illegal, the money that he now makes from that sale is his. So if he now uses that to marry a woman, they're married. Now why? Right? That's seems so you see clearly from here, wages or money that you receive through the sale of something that's asur b'hana is yours. You don't have to get rid of it.
What's that expression? It's a mitzvah.
Mitzvah baba vera?
Yeah, mitzvah baba vera.
Kind of like that, yeah. Right. But nevertheless, it works.
Right.
Ella, so rather, hol v'tofes as damav kavodos kochavim. Rather, maybe the reason why is because the issue is that, like idolatry, the money becomes itself part of the Avodah Zara, right? So when the work serves the yayin nesech, which is serving the idol, that actually makes the money prohibited as well. That's what's happening here. It's not an issue of using something bahana. It's an issue that's unique to Avodah Zara. But if you remember when we talked about it, it's not just Avodah Zara. We had Avodah Zara and Shvius that had the same thing. So v'harei Shvius de tofeses es dameho. We're going to say, well, okay, let's take the comparable case of Shemitah, right? Shemitah produce, and it also, right? If I trade one Shemitah item, if I trade my Shemitah oranges for somebody's apples that are not Shemitah, the apples become Shemitah produce, right?
And does it take away the Shemitah from the orange?
And it doesn't take away Shemitah from the orange either, right? But if he then trades that apple for something else, for some grapes, then the grapes are Shemitah and the apples are not, but the orange stays, right? That's what we had said. The original item stays, and the last item that gets traded stays. Now, Utnan, we learned in a Mishnah. Ha'omer lepoel, if somebody says to a worker, Heilech dinar zeh, here's some money, Lakot li bo yerek hayom, scharo aser. He says, I want you to go harvest for me vegetables today. That's prohibited, right? Because he's telling him to harvest and buy. He's basically buying the produce. That's not allowed. Can't buy produce of the Shemitah. Now, if he says, Lakot li yerek hayom, scharo mutter. If he says, though, I want you to harvest vegetables, right? But he doesn't, and then, by the way, here's some money. He doesn't specify, I guess, that this money is for the sake of, is actually to purchase this item, so then the wage is permissible. Now, it sounds like the only problem is actually buying the produce, but actually doing the Shemitah work doesn't it itself prohibit the money that he's making out of it. So why is it that carrying and schlepping the Avodah Zara, the what do you call it, the wine for the Avodah Yayin Nesech is prohibited? So Amar Rabbi Yevo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yevo says in Rabbi Yochanan, Knas hu shekansu chachamim bechamarin ubeyayin nesech. So he says that is a punishment. The chachamim said that we don't want anybody getting any benefit from yayin nesech, and we don't want anybody getting any benefit from donkey drivers, right? So therefore, they made a rule, you cannot get any benefit from these circumstances. Even though it's all durabanan, even though midoraisa, it's not as though the wages are themselves serving the yayin nesech or whatever. It's just, stay away from this. We don't want anybody helping the non-Jews with their yayin nesech, therefore, don't go there. Now, yayin nesech hodamer, we got the yayin nesech one, right? The yayin nesech is if you work for somebody schlepping yayin nesech, then you can't get the benefits. Chamarin maihi, what is the donkey drivers? What are we talking about? Where's the knas of the donkey drivers? Ditanya, we learned in a brisa. Chamarin shahayu osin malacha beperos shvius. They had donkey drivers that were doing business with the produce of Shemitah. Okay, now you can buy and sell an individual item from Shemitah, right? You can't do major big business with it though. So therefore they didn't like the donkey drivers was they didn't like the donkey drivers schlepping the produce from Shemitah. Now, my scharon, what was the problem with this? What were the donkey drivers getting paid in? So Shvius, right? Their payment was Shemitah produce. In other words, at the end, the guy got there and said, okay, now you could take some of this Shemitah produce you've been schlepping, that's your wage. So, if you're saying that he got paid with the actual fruit from the Shemitah, so that would be a Torah problem, not a rabbinic problem, because the Torah says, right? So the Torah says, le'achlav v'lo l'schora. You can eat Shemitah produce, right? Wild things that grow, you're allowed to pick those and eat those. But you're not allowed to sell them, do business with them. So if you're paying somebody's wages with Shemitah produce, that's a Torah prohibition. That's not just rabbinic. So what are you saying? The Rabbanan came along and they penalized the donkey drivers. Ve'ela de kodesh schoron b'kedushas shvius. What they said was that even though they were getting paid not with Shemitah produce, they consecrated their wages as though it were Shemitah. So therefore, that created a circumstance where that they had to get rid of it by the time Shemitah, there are deadlines in Shemitah. When the produce isn't available in the fields anymore, then you're not allowed to keep that product in your house. So if you're in Israel during the Shemitah, they have a whole calendar of all of it, right? So there are no more oranges in the field after this date. So that means you can't eat Shemitah oranges following this date, right? So you're allowed to eat up until this point. Afterwards, you can't eat them anymore. Machlokas between the Rambam and others. The Rambam says you actually have to destroy all of it, and others say no, it becomes hefker, and then you can reclaim it theoretically afterwards, but it becomes hefker. So now that will be the same thing with this money. Umi kadosh, is that true? Are they sanctifying it? V'hatanya, we're in a brisa. Homer lepo, somebody says to his worker, Helich dinar zeh, right? Here's the case, right? Here's this money. V'loko li yerek hayom, and I want you to harvest for me, pick vegetables for me today. So then schara mutter, then the wage is fine. Loko li yerek bo hayom, but if he says, I'm hiring you with this wage in order to pick the vegetables, so then it's usher. So
isn't he asking him to pick the veggies during Shemitah, or is this after Shemitah?
Sorry?
I think you're not allowed to pick the veggies during Shemitah either.
You're allowed to pick it if it's hefker. You're allowed to pick the vegetables. You're not allowed to work the field, right? Anything that grows wild can be harvested.
If you're picking it, create some of the seeds
for the poor people, right? It's hefker.
Create some of the seeds as you're picking it, some of the seeds or whatever. Go back into the ground and then help harvest it again.
You're responsible for the things that you can prevent, not the things you can't prevent, right? So this indicates that the Shemitah Kedusha doesn't carry over to the produce that he's exchanging for the work. It's mutter, right? It's only if he purchases with it that it becomes prohibited. So Rabbi says, Liolam Yahavina leschar mi pirosh shvius. What's happening is he is in fact using the produce that Shemitah in order to pay the donkey drivers. As far as the issue that you were concerned, the Torah says I can't do that. They did it in such a way that it was sort of permissible. How did they do it? A person shouldn't say to his friend, right? He shouldn't say, here's my Meiser Sheni. Can't hire somebody using Meiser Sheni. It doesn't belong to you. It's holy produce. So a person says, I'd like for you to do me a favor, and you're a moving company, schlep all my Meiser Sheni up to Yerushalayim, right? And you can take a portion of it, right? Because you can't pay him. You can't pay the worker with your Meiser Sheni. Aval, however, Omer lo ha'aleim le'ochlam l'shtosam b'Yerushalayim v'nosnin zelazeh matana shochinam. He could say, however, you know what? Help me schlep everything up to Yerushalayim, and then I'm going to invite you out to dinner. Then I'm giving him a free gift. It happens to be that the produce that he's schlepping is what I'm going to give him as a free gift. But you can't give it to him as a wage, but you can give him as a free gift. That's what these donkey drivers were doing. They were schlepping the produce. They weren't paying them as a wage. They were saying, okay, great, thank you so much. Here's your free gift. And that was permissible. The rabbis did not like it. And therefore they told them, you're penalized, can't get any benefit from that either. For Rava says, Li olam de kodesh kedusha shvius. No, it is like we said originally that they they gave them wages, and they said that the wages became with the holiness of Shemitah. Your question was, Poel delo nofish agrei lo kansuhu. Then what about the worker, where we said the worker was permitted to do that? They said, a worker's a small amount. The worker picks a little bit of vegetables for himself. Lo kansu, the rabbis weren't so concerned. It was a minor issue. They're allowed to do that with small amounts on Shemitah, right? Rabbanan, but lo kansu Rabbanan. But Chanrin, but the donkey drivers, did nofish agrayu, they were making a lot of money on this deal. So therefore, kansu Rabbanan, behu, the rabbis came along and said, you can't do that. Umasnis and chumra diyayin nesech shani. And our Mishnah is saying that, as for our Mishnah, the stringency of Yayin Nesech is different. So therefore, they were extra strict with Yayin Nesech and said, you can't touch any of the wages. So they made a rule about Yayin Nesech, can't get any wages from it. They made a rule about donkey drivers schlepping Shemitah produce, can't get any benefit from the wages for that either. Okay, it's a place to stop.
I
Right?
won't be here tomorrow night. I'm driving.